We're live here in Scotland, where President Biden just wrapped up a foreign trip that at least partially has been overshadowed by domestic issues back home. Any minute now, Donald Trump will face the deadline to file a response after officials argued the former president's records should be handed over to lawmakers investigating the January 6th insurrection. Let's bring in our senior legal affairs correspondent, Paula Reed. So, Paula, what do we expect Trump will say in his official response?
Well, Wolf, his legal team has 3 minutes left to make the deadline to file their latest arguments in their effort to block the National Archives from turning over hundreds of pages of Trump White House records to the House committee investigating January 6th. Now, this case, this lawsuit goes before a judge on Thursday, and it really does raise a lot of interesting questions about executive privilege. Now, the House committee had asked the archives to turn over these documents. The archives let the former president know, and he tried to assert privilege. But President Biden, he's the one with the power to defend privilege and protect documents from previous administrations, and he declined to do that here. He said it wouldn't be in the best interest of the United States. So former President Trump sued. It's unclear exactly what his lawyers will argue in this filing, but we know just a few days ago the National Archives filed its arguments, and Wolf, that was explosive. They laid out in very specific detail exactly what it is that Trump does not want investigators to see.
You know, the former Vice President Mike Pence, Paula, he's given some new insight into why he decided to defy Trump on January 6th and go ahead and certify the 2020 presidential election. Tell our viewers what he said.
Such an interesting moment, Wolf. He was asked who prompted him to defy Trump's efforts to undermine Biden's victory, and he had such an interesting answer. Let's take a listen.
What is the name of the person who told you to buck the President Trump's plan and certify the votes?
James Madison. Psalm 15 says, "He who keeps his oath even when it hurts." And the only role of the federal government was to open and count the electoral votes that were sent by the states. You've got to be willing to do your duty.
Again, he was facing such pressure from Trump's legal team to undermine Biden's victory. In fact, he was in the Capitol during January 6th, where some rioters were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Now, he is, of course, expected to be a potential GOP candidate in 2024, but he says he stands by his decision on the 2020 election.
Yeah, he made the right decision, and he's defending it very, very strongly in strong words. I wonder what the reaction is going to be. So he has less than a minute now, Trump, to deliver his arguments. We'll see if he does that, and you'll update us when we know more. Paula, as usual, thank you very, very much. Paula Reed reporting for us from Washington. And I'm Wolf Blitzer. Thanks very much for watching. I'm here in Scotland. Election night in America starts right now.
It is the final hour of voting in Virginia in a high-stakes election that could jolt American politics and shape the all-important battle for control of Congress next year. Welcome to CNN's coverage of Election Night in America. I'm Jake Tapper, and we're counting down to the first results of the night less than 60 minutes from now. That's when voting ends in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where the governor's race is the hottest showdown of the night. It pits former Democratic Governor Terry Mcauliffe against first-time Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin, and it could go either way. Mcauliffe has campaigned with big-name Democrats from Biden to Harris to Obama as he's faced an unexpectedly tough fight in blue-leaning Virginia. Youngkin has the support of Donald Trump, but he has sought some distance from the former president as Mcauliffe has aggressively tried to link the two Republicans. In addition to Virginia, there is one other governor's race being decided in New Jersey. Incumbent Phil Murphy is hoping to become the first Democrat re-elected governor in the Garden State in more than 4 decades. He faces former Republican state lawmaker Jack Ciattarelli. Also tonight, there's a high-profile contest in New York City. Democrat Eric Adams is highly favored to win the mayor's race against Republican Curtis Sliwa. Voters in a slew of big cities all across the United States are choosing mayors, including Boston, Atlanta, Minneapolis. There's a very controversial ballot measure in Minneapolis as well. Voters deciding whether to replace the police department in Minneapolis with a Department of Public Safety in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd. Also, 2 special congressional elections in Ohio could change the very narrow balance of power in the House of Representatives. We're also watching a special congressional primary in South Florida. Our correspondents are at key locations as we await the first results in what could be a bellwether election. Let's start with the Virginia governor's race. Jeff Zeleny is at the campaign headquarters of Democrat Terry Mcauliffe. Jeff, one thing is certain, it is a tight race. What are they feeling down there? What are the campaign aides saying about turnout in all important for the Democrats, Northern Virginia?
Jake, an absolutely tight race, and the Mcauliffe campaign is using the final hour. They're still knocking on doors, I'm told, and texting voters. They've made door knocks to 160,000 voters today, I'm told, by the campaign. And Jake, they're focusing on one thing. Those voters who supported Joe Biden a year ago and this year have either decided to not vote at all because of a lack of enthusiasm, or simply they do not support Terry Mcauliffe. But they are working into the evening to try and get those voters across Northern Virginia, the suburbs just outside of Washington, to the polls. We are hearing reports of long lines in Fairfax, that of course a Democratic stronghold. Joe Biden won that almost 2-1 over Donald Trump. So the Mcauliffe campaign believes high turnout is good for them. They certainly believe that they will exceed the 2.6 million votes in the Virginia governor's race in 2017, and both sides are saying it could be about 3 million or so. So the Mcauliffe campaign working into the evening, but they know enthusiasm is not necessarily on their side. They're trying to overcome that by dragging all those voters to the polls in the final hour, Jake.
That's right. A Democrat told me earlier it's math versus momentum. Momentum for Glenn Youngkin. Let's go to Republican Glenn Youngkin's headquarters right now. Eva McKenda is there. Eva, he definitely closed strong. The question, of course, for Glenn Youngkin, did he close strongly enough?
Well, his campaign certainly seems to think so. You know, all afternoon I've seen campaign staff, Jake, and they have a little pep in their step. They are feeling really good, lots of momentum. They say that they've seen a lot of people turn out in Chesterfield and then also Republican areas of Loudoun as well as Fairfax. So that is making them feel really good about this race. When you think about where Glenn Youngkin was just a year ago, nobody knew who he was, right? A former private equity co-CEO, and now statewide recognition. And so that is what they are talking about, the fact that this unknown figure could be running neck and neck governor of Virginia, all of that having them feel pretty good.
All right, Eva McCann, thank you so much. Let's go to Pamela Brown now at our voting desk. Pamela, what are you going to be looking for in Virginia this evening?
Well, Jake, turnout is key, and Virginia has one of the longest early voting periods in the country after the state expanded voting options last year. Registered voters had 6 weeks to cast their ballots early in person, starting on September 17th and then ending Saturday. And all registered voters had the option to request an absentee ballot and vote by mail. So here's what's important. To be counted, mail-in ballots need to be postmarked by today and received Friday by noon. Let's take a closer look at the numbers. Here you go. They're right here. Nearly 1.2 million pre-election day votes have been cast either in person or by mail. But look at this comparison. That is less than half the number of pre-election votes cast just before the 2020 presidential election. So how fast will results come in? The November 2020 election gives us one look. If you take a look at that, counting at 1 a.m. on election night, 85% of Virginia votes were counted. By noon on Wednesday, 94% of votes were counted, but election officials from across the Commonwealth tell CNN they think reporting will be faster this year because they started processing those early votes sooner than last year's election in many parts of Virginia. Jake?
All right, Pamela Brown at the election desk. Thank you so much. With me, of course, as always, the Magic Man, John King, at the Magic Wall. And John, what are you going to be looking for tonight, and how is it going to unfold? Do we know where votes are going to come from first?
You raised the key question right off the bat, especially following Pam Brown talking about that early voting. And let me just bring up those numbers to show the pre-election voting, because this is what makes Virginia different. This is not the 2020 presidential election, but in a Virginia governor's race, this is new. The last governor's race, shy of 200,000 early votes. We know now more than 1.1 million early votes. So to keep that in mind as I go through what normally happens in Virginia, this is the 2021. We're going to fill that in soon. let's go back here and look at the 2020 presidential election. We'll start here. Early on in the night in Virginia, like in many states in 2020, the person who jumped out to an early lead, remember, Joe Biden was winning Ohio and winning Texas. Donald Trump jumped out to a big early lead in Virginia, and that is traditional. I'll show you the last governor's race right now. Why? Because these counties, the smaller rural counties, Trump country, Republican country, tend to report first. That could be very different tonight because of this early voting. So it is very conceivable. Democrats think they did very well in that early voting, not like 80-20 like we saw in Philadelphia or we saw outside of Atlanta in the presidential race. But the Democrats think they did very well in the early voting. So if that comes in first, it's quite conceivable the Democrat, because a lot of that is up here, jumps out to an early lead. Let's start with the template of the last governor's race. 53 or 54 if you round up to 45. Ed Gillespie, for several hours 4 years ago, Jake, because this did come in first down here, he thought he was going to be the next governor of Virginia. It was a very close race. But then the Washington suburbs came in, the Richmond suburbs came in, and down here, Norfolk, Virginia Beach. This used to be a more Republican area and has become a very pro-Democratic suburban area. And that's what we're going to look at tonight. Trump, if we go back to the 2020 map, Trump has been a curse on the Republican Party in the suburbs, and Virginia is just your textbook example. Loudoun County, George W. Bush carried Loudoun County in 2004 on his way to carrying Virginia, the last Republican to do so. Look at that, 37% if you round up. That's simply not competitive. You move over a more populous Fairfax County, 28%. Donald Trump has been a curse on Republicans in the suburbs. Glenn Youngkin believes he has cracked the code. So we want to watch as the Northern Virginia suburbs come in tonight. And I would say this as well. Watch down here. These are less liberal suburbs, more traditional Republicans in the suburbs, military communities down here, government communities, lawyers and professionals down here. Yes, the most votes are here. The most votes are up in Northern Virginia. It settles close races. But Glenn Youngkin needs to get all of the Trump base. All of the Trump base. Even if he gets it all, it's not enough, though. The math is just against him. He needs to perform in the suburbs. This will be key, as it always is up here. This settles close races in Virginia. But the first test for Youngkin is when we start seeing the votes come in the suburbs around Richmond and down here, Norfolk, Virginia Beach area. Is he competitive? That will be our first clue.
So you're saying that the suburban voters that went for Biden in 2020 outside Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Richmond, might be less inclined to go for Terry McAuliffe, theoretically.
This is a more liberal, more diverse, more democratic suburban area. This is much more, you see much more evidence of the Trump revolt. More traditional Republican voters. Henrico County, right here, north of Richmond. We'll watch that tonight. Chesterfield County, down here just south of Richmond. Watch that tonight. If you go back in time through some of these earlier races, again, this is the governor's race. See how Ed Gillespie lost, but look how much more competitive he is. He's more competitive here. He's less competitive here, but if you talk to the Youngkin campaign, they believe in the central Virginia suburbs and in the southeastern Virginia suburbs, they can crack the Trump curse in the suburbs. And then the question is, again, this is where the population growth has been. This is where the Democrats have gotten deep roots in what was once a red state. This is why it flipped to blue. But for Youngkin, starts here, building blocks here, that will decide it.
All right, interesting. We'll see what happens, of course. Stay with us as we count down to the first results in the battle to be the next governor of the great Commonwealth of Virginia. We're going to find out what the exit polls are revealing about the Biden and Trump factors in this election. That's all ahead. Stay with us. And we're back with CNN's coverage of election night in America. The clock is ticking toward our first results out of the critical battleground of Virginia. That's where Democrat Terry McAuliffe and Republican Glenn Youngkin are duking it out to be the next governor of the Commonwealth. The outcome could tell us a lot about the state of American politics right now. Let's check in with our correspondents in a region we're going to be watching closely this evening, Northern Virginia. First to Ryan Nobles in Fairfax County, the county with the most registered voters in the entire Commonwealth. Ryan, tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, Jake, Fairfax County, the biggest county in the Commonwealth, and also so important to Democratic hopes of winning here tonight. And Democrats have to be happy with what they've seen here in the last hour and a half. At around 5:30, we saw traffic pick up at this polling location where I'm at exponentially. In fact, there's a big line that snakes out behind me and outside right now as more voters are heading to the polls. Now, in the past, Fairfax County has always taken its time reporting its results because it has so many votes to count. And that's made the situation a little bit anxious for many voters because of the size of Fairfax, it could flip the results pretty quickly when those votes do in fact come in. And sometimes they don't come in until late in the evening. That's going to be a little bit different tonight because of the early voting numbers. In fact, Fairfax has already in-house close to 170,000 votes, both early votes and vote by mail. Jake, they'll count those before 8 o'clock, so we'll get that first big tranche of votes here in Fairfax. It won't tell us the whole story, but we'll at least have some idea of where the county is headed. Jake.
All right, very interesting. Let's go to Brian Todd now. He's at a polling location in Ashburn, Virginia. That's in critical Loudoun County, where, Brian, as you know, Republicans are hoping for a strong showing this evening.
They really are, Jake, because the Democrats have made real gains here in the last 10 years. Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, thinks he can retake this county for Republicans this time around, and it's going to be very tight in this county, as we've been saying all along. Here's a shot of the polling area back here as the polls are getting ready to close in a little bit more than 30 minutes. We had a line out the door just a short time ago for the first time since the polls opened. I want to go over to two voters here. They don't want to give their names, but they just moved here from southwestern Virginia, switched party affiliations. What are the issues that drove you here?
So the main issues that drove me here today are especially women's rights, or human rights in general, but especially a woman's right to choose, as well as I want to ensure that the COVID pandemic is being treated appropriately and that we are following the science as we continue to strive for further guidelines in the future, as well as I fully trust our educators and the curriculum that they have imposed. And so I really feel like we need to place the power with the educators who have been trained as such.
All right. And so you said that divisive politics in recent years kind of fueled your vote.
Yeah, I think that really in recent years the focus has been too much on kind of like attack ads and us versus them mentality. So I really just wanted to take the approach of, looking at the issues and picking the candidates that I believed had kind of the best interest in mind of the majority of Virginians.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for talking to us. Good luck. The education issue, Jake, is crucial out here. The handling of school safety, student safety, teacher safety is controversial here. Glenn Youngkin has seized on those issues, as well as the idea about teaching critical race theory, which is not even in the curriculum officially in Virginia, but there are some voters here in Loudoun County who believe it's kind of unofficially being taught, and they like Youngkin's message on that, Jake.
All right, Brian, thank you so much. Appreciate it. I'm here at the Magic Wall with John King. Loudoun County. Republicans have a lot of hopes for Loudoun County this evening.
They have a lot of history in Loudoun County. Recent history has not been good. Let's talk about why they are such important battlegrounds within the battleground, if you will. Let me take this one off, come back here to the population growth. The population changes in Virginia in the last 10 years, last 30 years they've been studying, but just in the last 10 years, where were they? Ryan was in Fairfax County. It is growing modestly right now. It has grown a lot over the last 30 years, still growing modestly. You see the scale down there. If you are lighter green, you're growing. Yellow, that's Loudoun County right there. It's the fastest growing county in Virginia right now. We talked about this earlier. See the darker green? That means losing population. This is Trump country. This is Republican country. They're losing population in those counties in the state, and the Washington suburbs especially are exploding. So why does that matter, Jake, when you come into an election? Well, if you go back to the 2020 presidential race, and we bring that up here, look what happened here. Fairfax County, again, the largest population center in the Virginia suburbs right up here, a blowout. Joe Biden won by 10 points because he had a blowout in Fairfax. But he also here, again, George W. Bush won Loudoun County back in 2004. He also had a blowout here, Trump getting only 37% in what used to be a Republican county. So what's going to happen tonight? Glenn Youngkin doesn't have to win those suburbs, but he has to be competitive. A lot of people think the last time Republicans won statewide was 2009, right, in the governor's race. The last time they were very competitive statewide, let's go back to 2014 and the Senate race. Mark Warner just barely won over Republican Ed Gillespie. Look what happened, right? Mark Warner won here by 17 points, more than that in Fairfax. That's why he won the election. Ed Gillespie, though, did win Loudoun County, but just barely, not by enough. As we watch the results tonight, can Glenn Youngkin win in Loudoun, which he probably would have to do, and probably by more than that? And then can he break through? Can he try to do better in Fairfax than happened to Ed Gillespie 7 years ago? Because if he can't, the math gets overwhelming.
Fascinating. They're still voting in Virginia, but we're getting closer to the end and the moment when the first results are going to be revealed. CNN's coverage of election night in America continues right after this. Stay with us. We are nearing the first results in an off-year election that is on the radar of political figures all across the country and around the world. Voting ends soon in the high-stakes Virginia governor's race. We are following another breaking story as well, though. Children ages 5 to 11 in the United States are now on the brink of being eligible to get Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. CDC advisors gave their green light a short while ago, and we expect the final sign-off from the CDC director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, any moment. Let's bring in CNN Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta with this news. Sanjay, now that the CDC advisors have voted to approve vaccines, the Pfizer vaccine for children age 5 to 11, what happens next? How quickly do you think those shots will be available? What might this mean in terms of ending the pandemic?
Yeah, I think this could all sort of unfold pretty quickly because many of these shots have already gone to pediatricians' offices, hospitals, and clinics around the country in anticipation of this. As you mentioned, we still need to hear from the CDC director for formal sign-off, but if that all happens, we're talking within the next couple of days, you could start seeing these shots become available. In terms of what it means, Jake, there's sort of two stories right now. One story is that the numbers are thankfully coming down in terms of cases and hospitalizations and deaths. But if you look at a map of the country overall, about 3/4 of the country still are in high transmission. That's the red. 100,000 children were diagnosed with COVID this past week alone. So the numbers are still quite high. If you get the same rate of vaccination uptake among these 5 to 11-year-olds as we've seen with 12 to 17-year-olds, it could have a pretty significant impact overall on the pandemic. The modeling shows that it would bring it down, accelerate the decline, I should say, by about 8%, which would potentially prevent 600,000 cases by next March. And then, of course, as you see on the screen there, Jake, there's obvious benefit to the children themselves. Thankfully, they're at lower risk. But you know, these advisors, they basically said, is the reward greater than the risk? And their answer was yes. It prevents cases, prevents hospitalizations, and prevents ICU admissions.
Yeah, they're unequivocal about that. And Sanjay, you and I are both dads, and our kids all are over 12 and fully vaccinated. There are a lot of parents out there, according to surveys, who are hesitant about getting 5 to 11-year-old kids vaccinated. Tell them why they should not be.
I think, first of all, you want to be thoughtful, but not hesitant about this. I think that, you know, when you look at these vaccines and look at the trial process it's gone through, you're really asking yourself, does the benefit outweigh the risk? I will tell you that, you know, you just saw some of the benefits there in terms of preventing some of these things. You know, we often think about just life or death, but people getting sick, people having long-term symptoms from COVID, people needing hospitalization, again, much less likely in kids. But you know, it happens. Jake, you know, we talk about other vaccines from time to time. You know, chickenpox vaccine, which was a big deal when it was made available in the country. A lot of people were clamoring for it. Before vaccines, chickenpox claimed about 100 children's lives a year. And that was a lot. It was so many that people really wanted the vaccine. We're talking about a disease that has obviously 700 some children have died from this. So just contextually, it's important sometimes to keep that in mind. And also side effects for the 5 to 11-year-olds seem even lower, smaller than kids who are older, Jake.
All right, Sanjay Gupta, thank you so much. Good to see you as always. Still ahead, the issues that voters care about most as we stand by for the first results from the Virginia governor's race and other races across the country. Stay with us.
Well, much of the country is watching as Virginia voters choose a governor tonight. We're closing in on the first results, and we're getting a read of the issues voters care about most in Virginia. Let's go back to David Chalian with our exit poll. So what have you seen?
Hey, Anderson. Yeah, just a reminder, this exit poll encompasses all voters, whether they voted early, in person, voted absentee by mail, or voted today on Election Day. And we asked folks, of these 5 issues, which are your most important, that you think is the most important issue facing Virginia? Economy and jobs runs away with it. 33% of Virginia voters today said the economy and jobs was number 1. Education, 24% said that. 16% said taxes. This, I think, is really interesting. Just 13% of Virginia voters said coronavirus is the number 1 issue. Think about what a difference a year makes on that. And then 9% said abortion. We also asked Virginia voters today, do you support requiring a vaccine at work, that employers require employees to get vaccinated? This is a majority support position. 54% of Virginia voters do support an employer requirement, 43% opposed. How about parents' involvement in their kids' education? You know, this has been the issue in these last several weeks in this race. A majority of Virginia voters say a lot. That's how much parental say should occur in schools. 53% say a lot, 31% say some, only 10% say not much, 3% not at all. This is that comment that has been haunting Terry McAuliffe from that debate at the end of September. And then the economy, the basic question we always ask, what do you think the condition of the economy is? 8% say excellent, 47% say good. So majority of Virginia voters have a positive outlook on the economy. 35% say not so good, and 8% say poor, Anderson.
David Chalian, thanks. We'll have more exit poll information coming up. David Axelrod, when the majority of the Commonwealth of Virginia cares a lot about education and parents want involvement in their children's education, when you have the Democratic candidate, Terry McAuliffe, saying, quote, I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach, how's that going to go?
I recognize a rhetorical question when I hear that. Look, that was a disaster for him. I think the context was a little skewed, but the bite was there. And when he said it, it triggered, and Youngkin and the Republicans seized on it, and it's clearly galvanized voters. You said at the beginning that the nation is watching Virginia. It's not that the nation is concerned about the quality of leadership in Virginia. They're looking for auguries about the future. And one of the things people are going to look at is how, if Youngkin wins, how did he prize some of that suburban vote back? And this will have.
And also, what does that mean for the Republican Party out there? Can you be a Republican, not support the former president, and still vote Republican?
I mean, there were many nods in here to some of the cultural issues that Trump championed, soft core versions of it. So, but yes, Youngkin kept Trump at an arm's length in the general election, used some of these issues to his advantage, but he's sort of like the Mr. Rogers version of that.
But with the polls still closing at 7 p.m. tonight, this could go either way. This is one of those election nights where you do not know.
It could really go either way. And the interesting thing about Youngkin as a candidate in Virginia is that people didn't know a lot about him. He didn't have a divisive primary where he would have to take sides on Donald Trump, pro-Donald Trump, anti-Donald Trump. He had a convention. He's a businessman. He started running as a businessman, kind of an establishment Republican. Terry McAuliffe handed him, as David is saying, an issue on a silver platter. So he looked like somebody that people who think things aren't going so well, I'm disappointed in Joe Biden. They promised me a lot of stuff. They didn't deliver. They're in Washington forming circular firing squads, can't get anything done. And they looked at Glenn Youngkin, the suburban dad. Terry McAuliffe looks like a suburban dad too, but they looked at Glenn Youngkin and they said, well, okay, so he could become something they wanted. One of those things was, I want to be involved in my kids' schools. And this, for suburban women, could become a very big issue.
Just make, before you move on, just one point we should make. And one of the questions is, how blue is Virginia really? It has been trending, but the history of Virginia has been that it has voted against the party of the incumbent president in almost every election. I think at 10 out of the last 11. In fact, Terry McAuliffe was the only one who defied this in 2013. So if Youngkin wins, they will be reverting to type. But it's stunning because just a year ago, Joe Biden carried the state by 10 points.
Can I just add one other little thing so interesting to me about Youngkin? He didn't have surrogates on the campaign trail with him. So if Donald Trump said, I wanted to go on the campaign trail, well, he said, well, we don't have any surrogates on the campaign trail, Mr. President.
Ben, what do you see tonight?
Look, first of all, it's not over. You do have the grassroots folks out there fighting for this on the Democratic Party side. The stakes are high. When this election is over in Virginia, we will know, have we seen the emergence of the Delta variant of Trumpism? The Delta variant of Trumpism. In other words, Youngkin, same disease, but spreads a lot faster and can get a lot more places. The suburbs, if they fall to him,
that's implying that Youngkin is more dangerous than the president, former president.
No, more easy to spread.
Okay.
Because more easy to spread. Because if you look at what he's doing, he is playing footsie with the worst of Trumpism. He's putting himself forward as a champion of parents. This is a referendum on parents' rights, but he's not talking about. But he's using all the critical race theory. Head fakes and head nods, which is a softer version of a very virulent kind of anti-black posture. And so I think this is a very big deal, because if this is a pathway, if you can flirt with Trumpism, if you can flirt with Trump and still win in the suburbs, that's a new development for us.
Scott?
I'm sorry, I just have to totally disagree with virtually everything you just said.
Tell me why.
I'll tell you why. Because Democrats, since January the 6th, really since Donald Trump got elected, but let's go back to January the 6th, have demanded, asked for, begged for, pleaded for Republican candidates who would not do what you just said, which is, embrace Trumpism and sort of run the kinds of races and style that he runs. Youngkin has rejected it. He has said it was wrong. He wasn't part of it. Donald Trump hasn't been in Virginia campaigning for him. In fact, there is a pent-up demand, in my opinion, to make America boring again with standard issue, run-of-the-mill conservative Republican candidates like Glenn Youngkin and like the candidates who did well down ballot in 2020. So a Republican comes along and does exactly what everybody says they want, which is, hey, let's have Republicans who don't act like Donald Trump. And you still beat them about the head and neck and claim they are Donald Trump. And then Joe Biden takes it a step further and says, hey, watch out, people wearing sweater vests or white supremacists. Have you been in Virginia in October? Everyone's wearing fleece vests. This kind of beating up Republicans over Donald Trump is not going to work. That's why this race is so close. Youngkin's on the issues. Democrats
If
are
he
on
wins
Trump.
tonight, it certainly sends a message to a lot of Democrats out there tonight. We got to take a quick break. We're nearing the top of the hour. Stay with us for the first results in the Virginia governor's race. That could set the tone for the midterms and beyond.
We are just minutes away from the first results on this election night in America. Polls are about to close in the most closely watched race tonight in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Former Governor Terry Mcauliffe is running to win back his old job and keep that office in Democratic control. He is in a very competitive matchup with first-time Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin. This contest, of course, has significant national implications and could offer a roadmap for the midterms next year and the 2024 presidential election. Beyond that, also tonight, Virginia is about to get its first woman and its first woman of color as lieutenant governor, no matter who wins. We're awaiting results from the race between Democrat Hala Ayala and Republican Winsome Sears as we count down the first votes. Let's go to Sarah Murray at the Virginia Department of Elections in Richmond. Sarah, what are you hearing from election officials in terms of turnout?
Well, Jake, we are waiting to get a briefing on that pretty soon now. We are expecting to hear from them, how they think turnout is going. And of course, if there have been any hiccups throughout the day that they think impacted voting or they think could impact counting later. As of earlier today, everything was running smoothly. There was, a jammed machine in one place. There was a minor power outage in another, but they were expecting, hoping things will go smoothly today. If there is any change to that, we will know soon.
All right, Sarah Murray in Richmond. Let's go now to Boris Sanchez. He's in Manassas, Virginia, which is in Prince William County, one of the northern Virginia counties. Boris, tell us what you're learning there.
Yeah, Jake, polls have yet to close here in Prince William County, just a few minutes away from closing, but already the 2021 gubernatorial race has exceeded expectations, surpassing the last gubernatorial race in Virginia by nearly 20,000 votes. Officials here at headquarters in Prince William County are expecting results as early as 7:15 p.m., where a batch of mail-in ballots that they've been tabulating for the last few weeks are likely to be posted. We'll keep you updated with the very latest information as we get it, Jake.
All right, Boris Sanchez in Manassas, Virginia. Let's go to Pamela Brown now, who's at our voting desk. And Pamela, you're taking a closer look at how the votes will be reported this evening. Tell us more.
That's right. I am, Jake. As of this morning, more than 88,000 absentee by mail ballots still had not been returned. They have to be postmarked by today, arrive by Friday to be counted. Let's look at Fairfax County. That is the state's most populous county. That county plans to count early votes first. In Fairfax, nearly 165,000 pre-election day ballots were cast. As of Monday, 55,000 by mail compared to roughly 110,000 in person. Let's go to Chesterfield County. That is a swing county right near Richmond, the state's capital. It plans to start counting election day ballots first. Also in Chesterfield, 67,000 pre-election day ballots were cast, nearly 14,000 by mail and 53,000 in person. And then let's take a look now at Richmond, where it plans to count ballots as they are ready. In Richmond, nearly 27,000 pre-election ballots were cast, 6,000 by mail and 20,000 in person. We should note typically early votes largely favor Democrats, but there in Virginia, both candidates put an emphasis on early voting.
All right, Pamela Brown, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Let's go to John King. He's at the Magic Wall right now. John, tell us what you're looking for right now.
Well, pretty soon we get to count the votes, which is great. The speculation is over now. We get to count votes. What are we looking for? This is the map of 2021. Obviously, it'll start to fill in soon. If you go back to the 2020 presidential map, a big blowout for Joe Biden. That is Glenn Youngkin's challenge. Democrats have been trending stronger and stronger in Virginia over the last 10 or 15 years. The last Republican win was in 2009. This is the last race for governor in 2017. So what does Glenn Youngkin have to do? He has to run it up out here. This rural red Trump Republican base has to run it up. But here's the big challenge. Trump was toxic for Republicans in Virginia and everywhere in the suburbs. The population centers of Virginia are in the suburbs here, and overwhelmingly in the suburbs here. And that is the big Youngkin challenge. Can he, Jake, reverse what has been a dramatic decline, a rout for Republicans in the suburbs? Run it up rural, compete in the suburbs. That's the challenge for the Republicans.
All right, John King, thank you so much. Polling places are closing in Virginia, home to the marquee contest tonight. The outcome of the Virginia governor's race could give us a gauge of the political headwinds, and we have a key race alert for you right now. Right now, the polls are closed. It is too early to call the Virginia governor's race between Democrat Terry McAuliffe and Republican Glenn Youngkin, and we are awaiting the first votes in this high-profile contest. We can now share more information from our exit polls, though, now that the polls are actually closed. Let's go to David Chalian with that. David.
Yeah, Jake, now we can take a look at how voters are splitting between McAuliffe and Youngkin now that the polls have closed in some key demographic groups. Let's look at young voters, 18 to 29-year-olds. It's key to note they make up about 10% of the electorate in today's race. That is about half the share that they were just a year ago. They made up 20% of the electorate in 2020. Smaller group, and look at this. McAuliffe is only winning young people by 7 points, 53%. Youngkin, 46%. You would say, hey, that's good. Except Joe Biden won young voters a year ago by 29 points. So Glenn Youngkin making up some ground there with young voters. Let's look at the other end of the age spectrum, 65 and older. You see Youngkin here has 53% of them. McAuliffe, 47%. They make up about a quarter of the electorate, and they're a much bigger size than they were just a year ago. So this electorate is older, and Youngkin is winning them by 6 points. White college-educated voters. This has been part of the story of the Trump era of politics, where Democrats have made real inroads into white college-educated voters. Right now, you see McAuliffe is winning 52% of them, Youngkin 48%. They make up about 38% of the electorate. White non-college voters, huge Youngkin territory, right? 76%, you'd expect to see this. This is part of that Trump base. McAuliffe, 24%. That is 36% of the overall electorate right there, and that's a big Youngkin group. He's winning them by much bigger than McAuliffe is narrowly ahead among white college-educated voters. Among Latino voters, McAuliffe, 69%, Youngkin, 30%, and they make up about 5% of the electorate in Virginia today. And finally, independents. We're going to watch how independents are doing all the time, but right now, Youngkin is winning independents 52% to 47% for McAuliffe. That's 30% of the electorate independents. Joe Biden was winning independents by a big margin just a year ago. Now, Youngkin is ahead here of McAuliffe among independents by 5 points. Keep your eye on this demographic throughout the night. Jake?
All right, David Chalian, thanks so much. Let's talk about this with Dana and Nia Malika. So, again, this is just exit poll information. We're waiting for the actual results, but if you were Terry McAuliffe or Glenn Youngkin watching this exit poll information come in, you would say the electorate is whiter than it was last year. The electorate is older than it was last year. Joe Biden won young people by a lot more than Terry McAuliffe is winning them. Joe Biden won independent voters. Terry McAuliffe is losing them. I would rather be sitting in that moment and be Glenn Youngkin than Terry McAuliffe.
Yes, exactly. But what is really remarkable about this night, especially Virginia, which is where we're focused, is we don't know. It is a toss-up.
Right.
And the fact that it is a toss-up, people are looking at it saying, well, Joe Biden won by 10 points 1 year ago. That is true. It has been trending Democrat. That is also true. On the other side of that, the history of Virginia is such that when Terry McAuliffe won his one term back in 2013, he was making history because the trend or the way that Virginia usually goes is they usually elect a governor in the opposite party of who's in the White House. So that is why we really don't know. That's, if you look at the history, why we really don't know. But more importantly, where the votes are, where the exit polls.
Yeah, and what kind of ground games these different campaigns had and how effective they have been, right? The door knocking campaigns. I mean, we always talk about turnout is key. Well, guess what? It is key. And we really don't know what the composition of this electorate is going to look like at the end. Even though we have something of a hint, and from the looks of it, Youngkin might feel a little better, and he certainly had momentum going in. But Democrats also feel pretty good as well about where they will end up at the end of this night. So that's what's so exciting. We just don't know.
And let's check in again with David Chalian, who has more information from the exit poll. David, what else are you learning?
Now we're digging in, Jake, to the education issue that we have discussed so much that's been sort of at the center of this race in Virginia for the last several weeks. So among parents, people who tell us that they have children under the age of 18 at home, Youngkin is edging ahead in these exit polls with 51% of them, Mcauliffe at 49%. I also want to look at those who say education is the most important issue. Now, remember, it didn't rank as high as the economy and jobs, but it was up there as an important issue for voters in this race. If education is the most important issue, Youngkin is winning a majority of education voters, 56% to Mcauliffe, 44%. That is a Republican taking away what is traditionally a Democratic issue and making it his at this moment in these exit poll results. And then, of course, that whole issue about whether parents should have a say in their child's education, we saw a majority of Virginians, some 53% of the electorate, believe that. That's how they're splitting. Youngkin gets 76% of them, Mcauliffe 24%. This is the report card on that gaffe that Mcauliffe made at that debate at the end of September. Youngkin's winning 3/4 of the voters who say parents should have a say in what's going on in their kids' schools. Jake?
All right, David Chalian, very interesting. And Glenn Youngkin, Dan and Nia Malika, Glenn Youngkin has been seizing on the education issue, which is a very significant issue. One of the things that's been going on in Virginia in the last year and a half is obviously, as has been going on across the country and around the world, is that in-person education, schools stopped. And then there was a lot of frustration among a lot of parents, not just conservative parents, independent parents, liberal parents, about schools being reluctant to reopen, about teachers wanting to get first in line for vaccines, which they did, and I have no problem with that, but then not agreeing necessarily to in-person education, even though they were vaccinated. A lot of frustration, and Glenn Youngkin may have given them an outlet for that.
Absolutely. This is such an animating issue in this campaign. And when was the last time we saw education as such a front burner issue for the electorate? But you're exactly right. The reason, full stop, is because of the pandemic, because of parent frustration, no matter what their political affiliation is. And he saw that, and he played on that. He took it a step further, Glenn Youngkin, in that he played into the culture wars. But that is an example of how he's trying to appeal to independents, appeal to people who are, generally speaking, frustrated and just looking for an outlet for that, but also giving a little drop to the Trump base, the GOP base, who like to hear, get some red meat. Unclear how much that's going to win, because he has to overcome the reality that Democrats have a much bigger and much more real structural advantage.
And then there was this fear of critical race theory, and you hear Republicans all across the country
explain what that is,
because
a lot of people might know it's not.
Well, it's this legal theory developed by Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw that essentially says institutions in this country were informed by racism, right? It isn't about your kid going to school if it's a white kid feeling guilty for slavery, but it is certainly become a boogeyman for Republicans, and this idea that folks are being taught in elementary school about white people being racist. So that has become a real talking point among conservatives. And
even though it's not part of Virginia curriculum.
It's not part of Virginia curriculum. It's not really part of any curriculum in like K through 12, but it has worked to scare a lot of white parents. You know, there was all this talk about the Pulitzer Prize winning novel Beloved by Toni Morrison being taught in school. So, and the Democrats I've talked to have said they feel like so far Democrats don't really have a good answer to critical race theory and the criticism coming from Republicans that it's just rampant in schools all over the country. So that's going to be something I think you're going to see a lot of Democrats do focus groups on. How do you actually answer that?
Terry McAuliffe called it a racist dog whistle, full stop.
But we should also note that during a debate, Terry McAuliffe, and it was about whether or not parents should have a right, the subject, to take books off the shelves in schools, and he said that parents shouldn't. But the way he said it made it sound like he was saying parents should have no involvement in schools education. A huge gaffe by him that Glenn Youngkin used over and over and over. That's even why the question split among voters who think parents should have a lot of say in what their child's school teaches. 76% say they voted for Youngkin. We're going to expect the first votes in the Virginia governor's race at any moment to come in. We have correspondents on the ground to bring you results as well. Back in a moment. And we have a key race alert for you right now because some actual votes are coming in. And with just a minuscule number of votes in, Terry McAuliffe has 1,126 votes. That is 216 votes ahead of Republican Glenn Youngkin with 910. That is 54.6% for Terry McAuliffe, 44.1% for Glenn Youngkin. But obviously, that is just a very, very small percentage of votes that are in. Where is it coming from, John? Where are the votes coming in from?
So you zoom in right here. You see the capital of Richmond. You come right down below it here, Chesterfield County. This county actually matters. This is one of the central suburban counties just south of Richmond. This is a place where Democrats, the transformation of Virginia from red state to purple state to blue state has been because of the Democratic growth here. You're absolutely right to make the point. This is a minuscule number of votes. It is proof, though, that we are getting started, that the counties are beginning to report results. And so then we will accelerate and get through it. Now, that's not a big, you always want to be in the lead, sure. But what matters is the end of the night. They're now counting votes. The polls are closed. No one else can vote anymore. So we watch that play out. Why does that matter? If you go back, again, this is what, 2,000 votes when you add it up. Terry McAuliffe is slightly ahead. If you go back to the 2020 presidential race and you come down here to that same county, this is one of the suburban counties where Trump was more competitive. It used to be a Republican suburban county. It has trended to the Democrats, but this is one place we very much want to watch tonight. The Youngkin campaign will tell you if they can win this state tonight, they will prove it in places like this. We talked earlier, if you come out to the full statewide map, I'll come back to the current race in a minute. This is the presidential race. Might actually be better to look at it in the context of the last governor's race and move this over. Again, Ralph Northam won Chesterfield County, but look how close it was, right? Essentially a tie in Chesterfield County. So this is one of the places where Republicans used to win. It's been trending more to the Democrats. If Youngkin is going to compete and possibly win tonight, it's going to happen like this, run it up out here in rural Trump country, rural Republican country, and then compete in the suburbs. So as we come back to the race tonight, and you look, now we're starting to see some other votes come in. Let's go back first to Chesterfield. An insignificant number. This is a very significant battleground within the battleground. Glenn Youngkin needs this to be red at the end of the night. So we'll be watching Chesterfield County throughout the night. If you come out here, we're just going to look now at some other places where we're getting, again, 200 votes shy just here. But this is one of the places. You say 200 votes doesn't matter. Every vote matters in a very close race. Glenn Youngkin needs these smaller rural counties, not only to be red, he needs to run up the math. And you're starting to see more of the votes come in some of these counties. Let's come up here. Culpeper County, we're getting closer to Washington. This is more rural, but if you start to drive out of Washington, you go through the highly populated suburbs, and you get into the ex-urban areas right there. This is a place where Glenn Youngkin, again, these early results, please don't jump to any conclusions at home. Virginia is one of these places. We're going to be at this for a long time. But if you're in a headquarters and you're just looking at the early results, this has to be red for Youngkin. We pick these little counties as we go through. Buchanan County, it is 0.3% of the statewide population. But again, in a close race, every vote counts. And so in the end, Glenn Youngkin not only needs to win by a big percentage in these counties, look at that 80% right there. Let's just flip over, go to the presidential race. Donald Trump, 83%. Donald Trump lost the state by 10 points. So when you see Glenn Youngkin, if he's getting big numbers here, that's great. That's what he needs. He needs to get all of the Trump base in rural Virginia. Then he has to crack the code in the suburbs. But you watch them come in. We can pop around a little bit if you want. Richmond County is a tiny 0.1%. This is on the shore. You see you're starting to move out. Again, Republican area most of the time as you watch it come up. So we just watch it. You fill in the map. It's nice to count votes. We have a long way to go before we know anything definitive, but we're starting to see this is Amherst County in the center of the state. Again, 0.4% of the state population. But that is the math, if you will. The building blocks for Youngkin is to run it up in these smaller rural counties, much like Donald Trump did, but much like Republicans do in every election, which is why As you see this fill in red, if you're a Republican, get optimistic. That's your right. But remember, every Republican has won these, but Republicans have not carried Virginia statewide since 2009. So they have to run it up in these areas. The key is going to be here, here, and then
Northern
giant
Virginia.
population center there.
Yeah.
This tends to come in late. Again, with the early voting this year, we may get some results there pretty quickly.
But we should just note that we have now more votes than we did before.
Right. And Republicans.
And Glenn Youngkin is about 70%, and Terry McAuliffe is about 30%. He's taken a 2,700 vote lead plus. But as we've noted, it's early, and we haven't gotten any numbers yet from the most populous parts of the state. How do you anticipate this filling in? Do we have any idea, like which states are going to report, et cetera?
We don't. And again, that's one of the mysteries of tonight. Traditionally, the Republican in any race, Donald Trump did it twice. Ed Gillespie did when he ran for governor last time, when he ran for Senate 4 years ago. Before that, traditionally, these smaller counties come in first, and the Republican builds a big lead, and then we get the urban and the suburban areas, and the Democrats catch up late. If you want to go back in time and look at this, I can show you. If we go back, let's come up to the presidential race in 2020. Let me come down here first. I've got to try to turn this off and come back to it that way. Come to the presidential race. My apologies. That's my going in the wrong order. Let's go back to the presidential race, right? This is where we were early, 8:30 on election night. Donald Trump builds an early lead. 2 hours later, look how many more votes we got. You're up to nearly 2 million votes. Donald Trump still in the lead. This is Virginia 2020. You get later, past midnight, Donald Trump still in the lead, but Joe Biden closing in. Why? The votes are starting to come in these blue areas. And then as we went later into the night, Biden essentially ties it at 2 a.m. Wednesday morning. Remember, election night went into the next day. And then as Fairfax County, these other counties came in, Biden pulled away overnight. So that's just an instructive lesson as we go through the night tonight, that don't jump to conclusions based on what you see early on. But if you're in the Youngkin campaign, you're looking at the map, you know where you need to fill it in red. At the moment, that's what's happening. Long way to go.
Yeah, although we should note at 2020, we had an idea based on the Trump campaign and the Biden campaign that they thought that Biden was going to win. Both of them did. Tonight, we have no idea, and it's a toss-up. Both campaigns have no idea what's going to happen.
Right. Publicly, both campaigns voicing optimism. Privately, both campaigns saying we're brewing a lot of coffee.
We have no idea what's going to happen. We're getting votes in. It's exciting. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We have a key race alert for you right now in the great Commonwealth of Virginia in the governor's race there. With 5% of the vote in, Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, has 74,409 votes. That's 52.6% of the vote. He is 8,408 votes ahead of Democrat Terry McAuliffe, who has 66,001 votes with 46.7% of the vote. Again, we only have 5% of the vote in, but as of right now, the Republican Glenn Youngkin has a lead. Let's go to John King right now at the Magic Wall. And one of the things that's interesting, John, as you just talked about in the previous segment, how normally votes from Northern Virginia, the Democratic stronghold and the most populous area, don't come in until the end of the night. But so many people voted early. They had early voting in Virginia, 45 days of early voting, vote by mail and early voting. And so now those Northern Virginia counties are able to give some votes early.
Some. Emphasis on some. And a key point as you watch the map start to fill in, we're at about 5% of the total vote. So we have a long way to go. If you're Glenn Youngkin, the map is filling in red where you need it to. In a very close election, we know the suburbs around Washington, D.C., up here, around Richmond, and in the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area. In a very close race, it's those suburban areas, population centers that tend to decide it. So we are starting to see some votes. This is one of the key suburbs we're going to watch tonight. Again, we're looking here at 1,400 votes or 1,500 votes. So this is not dispositive by any means. This is the first glimpse of votes. But Prince William County, traditionally, you go back 25 years ago, a Republican suburb that has trended Democratic. Terry McAuliffe wants to keep this blue. This, again, the very tiniest smidgen of early votes right there. If you come within it right here, the city of Manassas, a population center here, Terry McAuliffe, early votes, again, shy of 5,000 votes if you look at it right there. This is the part of the map that needs to stay blue, and the Terry McAuliffe needs to run up pretty healthy margins. You move closer to Washington, D.C., let me stretch this out. You see just across the Potomac in Arlington, Virginia. This is a very liberal Democratic stronghold, and you see, again, about 31%, they say, estimated. Now, again, with some of the early voting coming in, those numbers could bounce around a little bit, but that's the biggest that's the biggest piece of chunk of math you see in 22,000 votes from one community. Arlington, a liberal suburb just over the border, just across the river, the Potomac River. Terry McAuliffe needs to win it big. Just by point of reference, if you go back to 2017, Ralph Northam, in winning the Virginia governorship by a healthy margin, ended up with 80% of the vote. Now, again, in 2021, we're just starting to count. So that's where Terry McAuliffe starts in Arlington. We'll see as the rest of the votes come in throughout the night. So you pop out to statewide, you see what else is coming in significantly down here. Real quick, Jake, Richmond here. You have down below, we talked earlier about Chesterfield County, Youngkin with a slight lead there, Henrico County to the north. Again, the Youngkin campaign says if it can pull this off tonight, it will be competitive in the suburbs around Richmond. Again, it's early, 52-46, one of the battlegrounds within the battleground. We'll continue to watch.
Very interesting.
There you pull it out.
I'm going to go to Joe Johns right now, who's in Chesapeake, Virginia. So why don't you punch up Chesapeake on the magic wall while we bring in Joe, who has some election results. Joe, what do you got?
Yeah, well, we've gotten 5 different precincts that came in. I heard John King say just a minute ago that it's good to count votes. If you look right through that window behind me, you can see the vote counting going on in action while I read some of these. All of the precincts reporting here in the Chesapeake City have Youngkin leading, and I'll just read you the raw numbers, if nothing else. Youngkin ahead in precinct number 1 that I've looked at, 667, Mcauliffe 312. In the second precinct, the numbers are similar. It's in the 400s versus the 200s, and so it goes. Another precinct, Mcauliffe is behind. Again, Mcauliffe has 382 votes. Youngkin has 664 votes. Still early. The simple thing we can say to you is we're going to keep watching all of these. The other thing that's important, I think, to say about Chesapeake is in total, last time around, it was Joe Biden winning the election. The question, of course, is what happens in this governor's race. And we can also tell you that we spent the day over at one of the precincts, a heavily African-American precinct. I talked to a lot of folks there. Interesting fact that a lot of the people really didn't know that much about Glenn Youngkin, but they said they were voting for Terry McAuliffe because they knew his name. Back to you.
All right, interesting. Joe Johns with some actual votes coming in there, John, and these are just it's just a couple precincts, but it shows a strong showing by the Republican Glenn Youngkin.
It shows, number one, yes, in a Democratic area, and I'll show you that in just a second. It also shows the values, just having reporters on the ground. Again, this is not dispositive. These are, as Joe mentioned, these are 2 of the precincts he mentioned where he had the firm vote numbers, and Glenn Youngkin ahead by a couple, 300 votes or with change there in all of those. So why does that matter? I just want to push this down out of the way. Again, this is in Chesapeake. They haven't officially reported them yet, so you still see the map blank. If you go back to the last governor's race, this is a very blue area. Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, all around in here. Again, there's a lot of military down here. It used to be more of a competitive area, a lot of Republican pieces in the suburbs. Democrats have made huge gains down here, in part because of African-American voters, in part because of the suburban revolt. Again, started before Trump, went on steroids after Trump. So it's one of the places we will watch. So as you start to get early results, let me just come back to the race tonight so people at home aren't confused and pull out. We think we're at about 5% of the vote, starting to sprinkle in around in the state, and we have what we thought we were going to have, some early votes in a very competitive race.
It's a very competitive race, only 5% in, 95% of the vote to go. We'll be right back with more of the actual votes from actual voters coming in on election night. Stay with us. And we have another key race alert for you as the votes continue to come in the competitive Virginia governor's race. We have 12% of the estimated vote from Virginia in, and Republican Glenn Youngkin is retaining his lead and expanding upon it. As of this hour, Glenn Youngkin has 211,382 votes. That's 55.3% of the vote. He is 43,149 votes ahead of the Democrat, former Governor Terry McAuliffe. Terry McAuliffe has 168,000. Oh, I'm sorry, that just jumped again. It's up to Terry McAuliffe has 173,192. Glenn Youngkin has 55.2% of the vote. Terry McAuliffe, 44.1% of the vote. We just jumped from 12% of the estimated vote to 13%. But Glenn Youngkin with a lead at this hour of roughly 43,000 votes. And, we have more votes coming in from Northern Virginia.
including from a very key county we'll be watching all night, Loudoun County. Again, one of the suburbs. You come across the Potomac River, you're into, first Arlington and Alexandria, Fairfax. You move out a little bit. Once a reliably Republican suburb, this has trended Democratic. Again, 45% of the estimated vote. Let's watch that throughout the night because you get some of the early voting, then you get the day of voting. But you see Terry McAuliffe jumping out to an early lead, almost just shy of 10 points. So you look at that and you think, okay, that's good for the Democrat. You go back in time to the last governor's race, though, and you look here, you see Ralph Northam in winning, the governor's race 4 years ago had a bigger margin there. And if you look at the 2020 presidential race, I would click it up here in Loudoun County, Joe Biden had a blowout. And so that's one of the questions we're going to watch tonight. Is Glenn Youngkin running stronger than Donald Trump, than Donald Trump last year, Ed Gillespie 4 years ago? Is he showing that Republicans can make inroads in the suburbs? Can't answer that question yet. At the moment, he is competitive. If you pull out and look, again, this is the major population center. Loudoun County is the fastest growing county in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So how it votes will matter a lot. You're starting to see, again, more of the map fill in. I just want to come down here as well. This is Albemarle County. This is Charlottesville. And around here, right here. And then if you come up here, we talked Loudoun County is here. Next to it is the largest population center, Fairfax County. This is Prince William, excuse me. Let me come up to Fairfax City here. We're getting some votes in Fairfax in the city. In the county itself, still waiting, but that's one of the places we have reporters on the scene.
Yeah, and in fact, punch up Fairfax County because I'm going to go to Ryan Nobles right now, who is in critical Fairfax County, Virginia. And Ryan, you have some vote numbers coming in for us. What do you have?
Yeah, that's right, Jake. Just handed the early vote and absentee vote return totals for Fairfax County. This is just the first tranche of votes that Fairfax has counted until this point. And it shows right now Terry McAuliffe with 98,657 votes total, both early vote and vote by mail, and Glenn Youngkin with a total of 34,410 votes. There's a total so far of about 133 votes cast, actually closer to 134,000 votes cast. And when you break those down, early voting versus vote by mail, it's a 77,000 of those votes are early votes, 56,000 are vote by mail. So that shows that there's still a pretty significant amount of early vote totals that have yet to be counted yet, because they were somewhere around 110,000 early votes cast in Fairfax County. Still, this is probably relatively good news for Terry McAuliffe, perhaps not the huge margins that he was looking for. But again, that total 98,657 for McAuliffe, 34,410 for Glenn Youngkin. And this is just the early vote totals and absentee vote totals, this first batch that they've been able to count, Jake.
All right, Ryan Nobles, thank you so much. Just to re-explain this to our viewers, those are votes that have not shown up on our big map yet. Fairfax City right there, Fairfax County is what Ryan was talking about. This is where Terry McAuliffe needs to run up the board.
Yes, absolutely. And again, this is the largest population center of suburban, it's the Washington suburbs in Northern Virginia. And again, if you want to, let's go back in time, look at the 2020 presidential race in Fairfax County. You see what we're talking about here, 70 to 28 if you round up President Biden. If you go back to the 2017 race for governor, 68 to 31. This is the Democratic vote breadbasket right here. This is where the Democrats have to run it up and run it up big, because not these other suburbs help. Without a doubt, the other suburbs help. But Fairfax is, when you get into a close election, I'm just going to slide this out of the way a little bit. We can bring it back if we need it. You know, this is 2017. You know Republicans are going to fill in this map. The issue for Republicans is every one of these votes counts, don't get me wrong, but these are smaller, less populous counties. If you look at the population centers and you bring it in this way, bring in population, you see this, these are Republican wins, these red circles, but the smaller the circle, the smaller the population center. You see what happens in these races. The Democrats with the big blue circles, that's because they're winning in the urban areas and the suburban areas where you have the higher population center. So even though this map, a Virginia map, tends to be more red than blue, like many states, the Democrats win because they run it up in the urban areas and the suburban areas. So when we come back to the current race, there is absolutely no doubt, especially with Youngkin. It's an early lead. We have to count all the votes as we get through it. But this is what happens. If Democrats are to come back, as we have seen them time and time again, by blowout margins in recent elections, Republicans often get the lead early. Comes down to this.
Right. And as you note, the Republicans are hoping that they got enough vote out today, election day, because Democrats traditionally get their votes out in the early vote and the vote by mail. So McAuliffe needs to run it up in the early vote and he needs to run it up in the populous Northern Virginia counties. We're going to take a quick break. The numbers are coming in. It's very competitive. Stay with us. And the votes keep coming in. Let's bring you the latest key race alert in the competitive Virginia governor's race. With 25% of the estimated vote in, Republican Glenn Youngkin remains in the lead with 410,598 votes. That's 52% of the vote. He is 36,837 votes, pardon me, ahead of Democrat Terry McAuliffe, who has 373,000, now 374,000. It was just updated to 26% of the estimated vote. 374,979. Glenn Youngkin remaining in the lead as votes come in, more than a quarter now. Youngkin 52%, Terry McAuliffe 47.3%. And we are getting votes from Northern Virginia. This is different from how it usually happens, John.
Yeah, sometimes when you get Northern Virginia votes, you get a little bit early, and then most of it comes in late. Again, midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. has been our experience in recent years, but we are seeing more. Again, that's in part because more than 1.1 million votes were cast early, and so you want to get the breakdown. And again, as you watch this play out, if you're in the Youngkin campaign right now, you're thinking, okay, we have a long way to go, but they expected, a big surge on Election Day. If you're in the Youngkin campaign, you're getting 47% in Loudoun County. Is that enough to keep it competitive? We'll see, but it's a lot better than previous Republicans have done up here. If you move over here to Fairfax County, this is a problem. This is good for McAuliffe and bad for the Republican. Fairfax, traditionally Democratic stronghold, but again, we have about a third of the vote. So we have to wait to see what we get later as we come. And these are the closer in Washington suburbs, more liberal, more reliably Democratic. You see McAuliffe there, about a third of the vote in, getting 81%. That's what he needs to do. You click down here, Alexandria. The Youngkin campaign thought it was going to overperform most recent Republicans, including Trump or Ed Gillespie in the last governor's race. Here, again, just 3% of the vote in here. So we're going to watch. I'll tell you something else we're watching. This, again, in a very close race, the Northern Virginia suburbs are the biggest population center, so they are dispositive, and they are the key to Democrats, especially if the Republican vote comes in, as you see here. One indication early on, though, again, it's early. I'm not sure why that shape came in there. Let me try to do that again. See if I could. That was good, right? I don't think I could do that again if I tried. So, every now and then I communicate with my planet. But if you watch in here, you come down here. If we go back to the race for governor in 2017, you see all that blue down
Yeah.
there. So you come back to 2021, so we just want to see what it is. And again, it's early, but it's what you watch, right? Youngkin has to rewrite the recent map for Republicans in Virginia. So that would mean, are you competitive in Virginia Beach? With about 20% of the vote in, the answer for now is yes. We don't know how this is going to play out, but this is why we're watching. Over in Chesapeake, where you just talked to Joe Johns, you add up all the math there, again, 6%. And if you're early on in the night, in the Youngkin campaign, you're thinking, okay, we're starting to lay down some markers. Early in the night, doesn't matter. We've lived through too many of these. I'm not discounting every vote counts, but we have to watch it play out. But as you watch that fill in red right here, you're encouraged. If you're the Democrats, you're going to watch right here. In addition to Northern Virginia, you have to win in the Richmond suburbs, in all of the suburbs, Henrico County here to the north of Richmond. That's relative. Again, you go back in time, that's McAuliffe Youngkin right now, as we get about 40% of the vote. If you go back, Ralph Northam winning big for governor 4 years ago at 61%. So if you look at it that way, in some of this early voting, we don't know the answer to the question yet. But one of the big questions is, does Terry McAuliffe overperform Northam, or at least run equal with Northam, run close to Biden in the Virginia suburbs, or does he underperform? We can look at that early on, Jake, and I want to just emphasize for people at home, this is early on.
Yeah.
We're just starting to build. But if you look at the map right now, and let's take it this way. Let's look at it from this way. Is Glenn Youngkin overperforming Trump? In a lot of places. In a lot of places at the moment. Again, the vote is early, especially.
What does this mean? If it's red, it's a county.
If it stays on. So let's come back to this. I'll turn it off for you.
That's just overperforming Trump.
Here you're looking at the vote right now. This is the actual live vote as we count it right now. If you bring this in, these are counties where Youngkin is overperforming Trump. It includes the early count in the populous Northern Virginia suburbs. We have a long way to go. This will matter a lot more in 3, 4, and 5 hours than it does right now. But if you're looking at your early vote counts in a campaign headquarters, if you're Glenn Youngkin, you're looking at the map and saying, so far, so good, the emphasis on so far. So let's come out and look at it from another perspective. Let's turn that off. Where is Terry McAuliffe? Again, this is the live vote right now, so watch what turns off. Where is Terry McAuliffe underperforming Joe Biden? You saw a lot of counties turn off, right? You see a lot of that turn off right there. That means at the moment in this early vote, McAuliffe is underperforming. Now, McAuliffe can underperform Biden. McAuliffe can underperform Northam, because both of them won in blowouts.
Right.
So it's important to note, this is a blue lean state. It's not a presidential year, and it's not the political environment that Ralph Northam ran in back in 2017. This is a much more difficult environment. So Terry McAuliffe can underperform Joe Biden, underperform the current governor, Ralph Northam, and still win this race, which is why you don't overemphasize them now. So this has come back to where we are, so you don't mislead people at home. But that's what we're going to watch throughout the night. It's a test. Are Republicans, is the Trump base turning out in a campaign where the Republican candidate kept Trump at arm's length? You know, that's test number one for Glenn Youngkin. He cannot win this race unless he gets all of the Trump base. But even if he gets all of the Trump base, it's not enough. He has to make inroads here, here, and here. Early indications are he's in play.
Yeah.
Now we count.
He has to draw a straight flush, but he's not out of the game yet. I
No,
mean, he's getting some good cards.
By no means.
He's getting some good cards. So we're standing by for more results out of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Polling places are about to close in the other governor's race being decided tonight. North of us in New Jersey, we'll have much more ahead. Stay with us. We have another key race alert for you right now. More votes are coming in from the Commonwealth of Virginia and the competitive gubernatorial race there. Let us look at what the voters have said so far. With about a third of the vote in, 33% of the vote in, Republican Glenn Youngkin is up with 556,912 votes. He has 54.2% of the vote, roughly 92,323 votes ahead of Democrat Terry McAuliffe, who has 465,588 votes. He has 45.1% of the vote. The votes are still coming in, though. It remains a very competitive race. There are still more than 2 million votes that we need to count. We're closing in on the next critical round of votes that could send a message to President Biden and the nation about the political climate right now. Voting is about to end in New Jersey, home of the second marquee governor's race tonight. Murphy is the Democrat. He is the incumbent governor. He's seeking re-election to a second term against former Republican state lawmaker Jack Ciattarelli. We're also standing by for votes in big city mayoral races across the country. Polling places are about to close in the contests in Atlanta and Boston. Right now, let's go to MJ Lee. She's in New Jersey at Governor Phil Murphy's election headquarters in the famous Asbury Park. MJ, how are they feeling in Governor Murphy's campaign headquarters tonight?
Well, Jake, essentially what Phil Murphy is doing as he tries to get reelected for another term, they are making the bet that the people in New Jersey are going to grade him based on how things look in New Jersey as opposed to focusing on the events that are happening in Washington. This sort of underscores the political reality right now, as you know very well, that the governor of New Jersey is more popular right now in his state than the leader of the Democratic Party, President Biden. He enjoys support from the majority of voters in New Jersey, whereas President Biden, he has seen his popularity slip into negative territory recently. And this is really important to think about. What is happening in Washington, something that Joe Biden came actually to New Jersey to try to sell his ideas on the infrastructure spending bill, the sweeping economic package. Obviously, he ended up being unsuccessful before he left for his foreign trip, but folks here are feeling cautiously optimistic. They don't want to come out and say that they are going to be necessarily successful, but ultimately they believe that because they were so focused on local issues, that if they are successful, that will be the key to why. Jake.
All right, MJ Lee in Asbury Park, New Jersey, with the campaign headquarters of Governor Phil Murphy, the incumbent Democrat. Let's go back to the Virginia's governor's race. Jeff Zeleny is at the headquarters of Democrat Terry McAuliffe in McLean, Virginia, Northern Virginia. Jeff, so far it is, well, the numbers are still coming in, but it is very, very competitive. How are they feeling it at McAuliffe headquarters?
Well, Jake, Terry McAuliffe has been through winning campaigns and he's been through losing campaigns. And right now I am told he is at home with his family, his wife, his 5 children, extended family, not far from here in McLean, Virginia. He is simply watching these results come in. Talking to one, a Democrat who has spoken with him throughout the day, saying he realizes that his rival, Glenn Youngkin, closed in a strong position. But the Mcauliffe campaign remains optimistic about the high turnout in these northern Virginia counties. They're keeping their eye on Fairfax. They're keeping their eye on Alexandria, other places. But, Jake, we did just get a very interesting letter that Terry Mcauliffe sent to his supporters. He said, win or lose, we fought a good campaign. So certainly striking not necessarily an enthusiastic tone, but thanking his supporters as they begin what could be a long night of counting here in Virginia. Jake?
That's an interesting letter for Terry Mcauliffe to have written. We're expecting the polls in New Jersey to close in 2 minutes. John King, quickly tell us what you're looking for.
Well, here you see the two candidates, Republican Jack Ciattarelli, as you mentioned, Phil Murphy trying to win re-election as a Democrat. That hasn't happened in a long time. Jake, you know the state well. You're from Philadelphia, so obviously you look at the suburban vote, right? You look at the suburbs down here across from Philadelphia, more importantly, the giant suburbs up here outside of New York City, and then the urban population center of Newark. This is a Democratic state. It's a Democratic state where Governor Murphy believes his COVID leadership has earned him re-election, so we will watch it play out again. The president's approval rating is down. Democrats say this is a tough climate because of COVID and because of the economy. This should stay a blue state, but we'll watch it to see as it plays out. We'll start to fill in the votes right there. We're waiting as we wait on New Jersey. Well, also, you see Virginia is leaning red at the moment, but there you see about a third of the vote in. Glenn Youngkin with the lead. One thing that the Republican campaign is saying there so far, Jake, is that they're very encouraged by the turnout in these rural areas, smaller communities where they say Republican turnout is exceeding the last governor's race 4 years ago. So the Youngkin campaign happy at the moment, but as you noted, a lot of votes still to be counted.
And we are just moments away from the end of voting in the New Jersey governor's race. We're expecting that at the top of the hour. Let us get a key race alert. It is still too early to call the New Jersey governor's race between Democratic incumbent Phil Murphy and Republican Jack Ciattarelli. We expect the first results soon now that the polls have closed, but we do not have information about that race yet. Let us now do a key race alert for the gubernatorial race in Virginia. The latest numbers have come in with 34% of the vote in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Republican Glenn Youngkin remains in the lead, 573,314 votes. That's roughly 54.3% of the vote. He is almost 100,000 votes ahead, 97,167 votes ahead of Democrat Terry Mcauliffe, who has 476,749 votes. He has 45% of the vote. As of right now, John King, Terry Mcauliffe is 9 percentage points behind. We don't expect that margin to hold necessarily, but so far, Glenn Youngkin has done what he needs to have done.
In the early vote count, he has. But to your point, I want to emphasize, we don't know what's going to happen tonight, but we do know you can go back in Virginia election history, whether it's presidential, prior governor's races, the Senate race in 2014, where you have seen Republicans take a big lead, even a big lead like that, because we have about 1 million votes there, a little more than that if you add it up. We expect about 3 million votes cast in this race. So we have a very long way to go. But if you are the Republican candidate, here's one thing. I'm going to go down to the tiny southwest corner of Virginia, right? Buchanan County. You say, why am I focusing on this? It's 6,000 people, right? Why would you think about that? One of the reasons Republicans are happy is, here was the question. Could a Republican who kept Trump at arm's length run it up in Trump country, right? 85% of the vote with about 90% of the vote counted there, right? Look at that number, 5,078. 4 years ago in the race for governor, the Republican won with 3,400 votes. The Republican campaign is happy, saying in rural Virginia, turnout is up from the last governor's race, and the margins are coming in for Glenn Youngkin as they count. Now, those are smaller numbers, but in a close race where every vote counts, this was challenge number one. Run it up. Get the Trump base to turn out and vote Republican, even though you told President Trump, please don't come to Virginia. At the moment, Glenn Youngkin seems to be meeting that challenge. Then the next challenge is suburbs here, vote rich area here, and then this is it. The ultimate prize in Virginia is up here. So how are we doing in those? If you're the Youngkin campaign, you're looking at Chesterfield County, suburbs south of Richmond, traditionally Republican, have gone more Democratic recently. You think, okay. Henrico County, more voters here when you come up to the north of Richmond. Mcauliffe winning here, 60% of the vote in. Just match it up. 60% for Northam. Again, Terry Mcauliffe can underperform Ralph Northam, the Democrat from 4 years ago. He can underperform him. He does not want to underperform him significantly. All right, Ralph Northam won. If you come back to the statewide numbers 4 years ago, it was not close. So when we compare Mcauliffe to Northam, you want to sound maybe not as good, but he can afford to underperform some. The question is how much, and that's why in the end we will come up here, because you see about a third of the vote, just shy in Fairfax. This is your giant, biggest basket of votes in Northern Virginia. the last of it tends to come in late, meaning midnight or later. 73%, 74% if you round up at the moment. If you go back, he's overperforming in the early count here. Terry McAuliffe overperforming the percentages of Ralph Northam. But look at the vote in the end here, right? In Fairfax County, 255,200 for the winner 4 years ago, which is why when you look here, 98,000. We have a long way to go. We have a lot more votes to count. If you're McAuliffe, you're looking at Fairfax, and you're thinking in a very close race, if he can get it closer, pull back out, see where we are, because votes are coming in constantly, just shy of a 100,000 vote lead for the Republican right now. Glenn Youngkin, you are happy with what you're seeing so far, but again, you remember, Republicans have led before, only to be disappointed as the late votes comes in up here. A lot of counting still to do.
It's another sign to your home planet.
Yeah, that was my knuckle. I did that one. I didn't do the last one. That was my knuckle.
Do the thing where you compare McAuliffe to Biden and Youngkin to Trump in terms of underperforming and overperforming.
All right, so let's start with McAuliffe. He's the Democrat in a blue state. All things being equal, he should win this state. All things are not equal. COVID pandemic exhaustion, Biden approval rating down, people worried about the economy. So all things are not equal, which is why this is a competitive race. But this is where we are right now, 148,000. See, more votes have come in just during, this is the magic of the magic wall, if you will. More votes come in during the conversation. 150,000 vote lead for the Republican.
Yeah, he just jumped up about 50,000 lead.
He just jumped up. So we'll look where those votes came from in a minute. So where is McAuliffe underperforming Joe Biden? You see where we are right now? When things turn off, right? You see all these counties that are still on the map. Terry McAuliffe at the moment in the early count is underperforming Joe Biden. Now, again, Joe Biden won by 10 points. Terry McAuliffe can underperform Joe Biden, even significantly, and still win the race. You don't want that.
I mean, Fairfax County is one of those that he needs to romp.
Fairfax is one of those counties, as is Prince Williams County down here. So you're looking at two of the suburban counties where, let's compare what we're talking about. This is Loudoun County. You see 53%, right? I'm going to have to do 2 clicks here to get you back to it. You come to the presidential race here. Joe Biden's getting, 61, 62 if you round up. Again, he can, because the margins were so big for Joe Biden and for Ralph Northam, Terry McAuliffe can underperform. The question is by how much? Now let's turn that off and look at it. Where is Youngkin overperforming Trump? All right, let me do it. Let me turn this off first. Come back just to show you. This is where we are live. It's now 152,893. So the lead for the Republican is growing. Again, a lot of votes still to count. So if you're Glenn Youngkin, how am I doing compared to Donald Trump? Am I overperforming? Yes, in a lot of places, including down here in Trump country.
So let me ask you.
At the moment.
So Youngkin's path, the concept of his victory was that he would be able to get people in, what was this, Buchanan County?
Yeah, Buchanan
County.
Down there.
That he would not only keep the people who voted for Trump, but maybe even build on it.
Right.
And in places like Fairfax County, just narrow the margins.
Exactly.
Does he have to flip any counties, or can he just overperform in super red counties like Buchanan and just narrow the margins in super blue counties like Fairfax?
Can he? Yes, but that's asking a lot. You would have to overperform on steroids. You would essentially need every voter to come out in here just because the population is so.
So he has to flip. He has to flip.
He has to flip some. So you're looking right now. Where could you flip? Right. Again, if you come down here and you look at Chesterfield County, if you go back to the last race for governor, it was blue. Right. The last race for governor, Chesterfield, the suburbs south, very close. Very competitive, but it was blue. So there are places where at the moment he is changing the map. Again, we have a lot of votes to count. But it's really hard to see. Even when he was in the other night, Youngkin was here in Loudoun County. It's the fastest growing county in Virginia. It's not the largest population center. Fairfax County is. But Loudoun is the fastest growing. And that growth is what has hurt Republicans in the suburbs. It's white college educated, it's younger voters, it's Latinos, and it's Asian voters who are increasingly a swing population in Northern Virginia. So where are we right now? 52-47. Where were we 4 years ago? 60-40. So Glenn Youngkin is narrowing the gap there. Is that enough? That depends on the turnout as we go through more of the night. And remember, we're still waiting to count Election Day vote, which is where the Republicans said they would overperform in the Election Day vote. We'll find out in the next few hours.
And we're also, of course, waiting for early vote. David Chalian, you have some new information from the Battleground Desk in terms of what voters who went to the polls, what they were thinking, what mattered to them.
Yeah, well, and we're digging into what you and John were just talking about, the difference between how much of this vote is early vote versus how much is Election Day vote. So right now, here's the vote total as things stand. We have about 41% of the estimated vote in. Glenn Youngkin has 710,176 votes. Terry McAuliffe has 554,200 288 votes. So the question is, how much of this vote that's in already is early absentee vote, people that either voted early in person or voted by mail absentee? Well, right now, our estimate is that 23% of this current vote that you see in is made up of early vote, people who voted before Election Day. But we expect that 23% to go up to 37%. We think at the end of the day, when every vote is counted, 37% of the electorate will have voted early. That means 63% of the electorate will have voted on Election Day. If indeed Terry McAuliffe is significantly outperforming with Glenn Youngkin in early vote, as Democrats hoped that he was, banking that vote, that growth from the current 23% to the estimated 37% is opportunity for McAuliffe to try to make up and dig into some of this Youngkin lead. Jake?
Yep, the race remains very competitive as the actual counting goes on. We're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, more from the New Jersey gubernatorial race, the Virginia governor's race, and much, much more. It's election night in the United States. Stay with us. We have another key race alert for you this evening as we watch these important governor's races and the actual vote come in. Let's start with Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia. 42% of the estimated vote is in, and Republican Glenn Youngkin remains in the lead. He had 43% now. Glenn Youngkin with 768,647 votes. That's 55.7% of the vote. He is 166,291 votes ahead of Democrat Terry McAuliffe, who has 602,356 votes. He has 43.6%, but it remains a very competitive race, and we are waiting still for more than 1 million votes to come in. To New Jersey, the Garden State. With only 1% of the vote in, incumbent Democratic Governor Phil Murphy has 25,358 votes. That's 70.9% of the vote. He is 15,238 votes ahead of Republican Jack Ciattarelli, who has 10,120 votes, 28.3% of the vote. But again, that is only with 1% of the vote in. Phil Murphy with a big lead, but still 99% of the vote to go. Let's look at Virginia, because we have more votes in. We have 43% of the vote in. And tell me where the vote's been coming in from.
Well, you start to see a lot of these more rural counties, a lot of the red filling in. We've seen a lot of that vote coming in, but we are getting some other votes. We can come down here to Southeast Virginia. You pop up here in Norfolk, the Democrat Terry McAuliffe, about 16% of the vote in. This is obviously one of the key Democratic strongholds. 63% with about 16%. Just want to go back in time and look. 73% Ralph Northam, the Democrat, won 4 years ago. So you're seeing consistently early vote. We have a ways to go, so numbers could change dramatically. Right now, Terry McAuliffe winning where Democrats need to win. The margins below where the Democratic candidate was 4 years ago. Much smaller community over here. You move over toward Portsmouth. 20th, though. You look at decent numbers change here. Here's what you look at, though. If you're looking at this strategically, if you are in the Republican, if you're in either campaign headquarters, if you're the Republicans, you're happy. Down here, Virginia Beach across the bottom. Ralph Northam won all 3 of those counties 4 years ago. Joe Biden won all of those counties 1 year ago. And so you see down here some strength.
How much of the vote has come in on those?
So let's pop them out and look. Virginia Beach right now, we're up to about 40% of the vote. And again, 58% for the Republican. And if you go back 4 years ago, Ralph Northam won with 51%. Close. It was competitive, but it stayed blue. If you come back up to where we are today, you move over here. Chesapeake, where you talked to Joe Johns earlier, again, a lot of votes to be counted still. So it's red now. That doesn't mean it stays red. But 16% of the vote, 65% for Youngkin now. If you go back in time, you see how the Republican candidate got 46%. So, again, we have a ways to count, so you don't want to jump to conclusions. If you're sitting at a campaign headquarters, though, you're thinking, are we meeting our metrics as we look at the map? Again, in this part of the state, what makes them happy is, I'll use Buchanan again just as an example because they're so close to finishing.
It's so stark also.
Number one, you see a big lead, but it's not just the big lead. Glenn Youngkin needs the raw math, not just the 85%. He needs the raw vote totals in these smaller counties, and the turnout is just higher than it was 4 years ago. So if you're the Republican and you know that as we get later in the night and we come back up here, Fairfax, the giant vote count, we have a lot more votes to count here. You see, already have 98,000 plus for the Democrat, 34,000, but it's only 32%. Again, you go back in time, remember that, look at that 98. Ralph Northam got 255,000 votes in Fairfax County alone 4 years ago, and we believe turnout is higher tonight in this race than it was 4 years ago. So we have a lot more votes to count, and Republicans have been disappointed many times before in Virginia, as the map fills in this way and they build a lead, only to see 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., the rest of the votes come in up here as they're counted. But if you're the Republican campaign, Republicans have not won statewide since 2009. So if you're Glenn Youngkin, you're looking at some of your metrics and you think we're doing okay. That history, though, is what tells you don't rush to conclusions. We have a long way to go.
Punch up Prince William County because I want to go to Boris Sanchez now, who's in Manassas in Prince William County. He has some more raw vote totals for us that I don't think we've gotten yet. Boris?
Yeah, Jake, before the numbers get to John at the Magic Wall, they come here to the headquarters of elections in Prince William County, and I'm looking at raw data right now with 58 precincts reporting. This is day of voting. Terry Mcauliffe right now with a 29,437 vote total. Glenn Youngkin, 25,716 votes, roughly a 4,000 vote difference between the two of them. That is day of voting. I also have some numbers for mail-in voting. Remember, Prince William County has been tabulating mail-in votes now for a couple of weeks. So far, the tally shows, actually, let's go ahead and repeat these numbers really quick. Again, Terry Mcauliffe, this is day of voting, 29,437. Glenn Youngkin, 25,716. Day of voting in Prince William County, an area that Terry Mcauliffe is counting on to lead him to the governor's mansion, as it helped do in 2013. This is the most diverse county in the Commonwealth. Of course, Youngkin trying to make inroads with moderate voters on education and the economy. Getting back to those mail-in numbers, again, this county has been tabulating them for several weeks already. They count it by 3 different congressional districts. So far, the total, Terry Mcauliffe holds an advantage, 6,572 votes versus Glenn Youngkin, 2,127. Again, Terry Mcauliffe, 6,572, Youngkin, 2,127, roughly 4,100 votes separating the two candidates there. These numbers likely going to get to the wall very soon. We'll keep you updated as we get more, Jake.
All right, Boris Sanchez in Manassas and Prince William County. And just to remind our viewers, Prince William County is one of the 4 major Democratic stronghold counties right outside Washington, D.C. It is where the Democrat in any race needs to really build up the score in order to account for and make up for all the Republican votes in most of the rest of the Commonwealth. So here we have roughly 5,000 vote advantage for Terry Mcauliffe if you count the early votes and the day of voting in Prince William County.
Right. The question is how much higher do we go as you count all these votes? I just want to push this aside a little bit and bring this out just to get you in statewide. You mentioned why this matters. I'm going to blank out the numbers a little bit and just pull the county back out again. Again, Washington, D.C., Arlington, Fairfax, Prince William. As the suburbs have shifted over the last 25 years in American politics, you go from blue, used to be competitive, now it's solid blue, used to be a swing county. Lately, it has been blue. The question is, can Glenn Youngkin cut into the margins? This is where we are right now. We haven't got those. Well, the numbers Boris just gave us will be tabulated through when the county officially reports them. But this is where you are right now. And again, you go back in time, and you're Ralph Northam, you won with 61%. So if you're Terry Mcauliffe, you don't need 61%, but you got to win the count. You have to win this county here. If you come back to where we are right now, I just want to look at it, you have to go way back in time, right? So you look at the 2017 race. If you go back to the last time a Republican won this state for president, you go back, George W. Bush carried Prince William County. So this used to be the Republican way to win in Virginia. Yes, the close-in suburbs, Fairfax, Arlington, Alexandria, went Democrat. But the outer, the Loudons and the Prince Williams were Republican. That has been the dramatic shift. If you watch it play out, just watch this. Watch this area right here in Northern Virginia. George W. Bush wins because the suburbs were growing, Fairfax and Loudoun, but then you come through it, Obama wins. That was the beginning of the change. It started before Trump, and then the suburban revolt against Trump has put it on steroids. The question is, can Glenn Young overcome that tonight as we continue to keep counting the votes?
Yeah, no,
that's where we are.
One of the things that's so fascinating about tonight's race is that the Commonwealth of Virginia is so traditionally Democratic, just in the last few elections. Although you and I are old enough to remember when it was a Republican stronghold, but states change. Ohio used to be competitive, and now it's pretty reliably Republican. The votes are coming in, and it is very exciting. It's anyone's race. I wouldn't put money on either one of them right now. Stay with us as CNN's Election Night in America continues. We have another key race alert for you now here in these two competitive races in Virginia and New Jersey. First to Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, where Republican Glenn Youngkin has 910,000 votes, 320. That's a 55.5% of the vote. He is almost 200,000 votes ahead of the Democratic challenger. He has 191,219 vote lead against Democrat Terry McAuliffe. Terry McAuliffe with 719,101 votes, 43.8% of the vote. That is with 51% of the vote in, but that is still a lot of outstanding vote that has yet to be counted. Still, Glenn Youngkin with the lead, 55% to 43% as of right now. In New Jersey, the Garden State, incumbent Democratic Governor Phil Murphy has 79,154 votes. That is 68.7% of the vote. He has a roughly 44,000 vote lead against Republican Jack Ciattarelli, who has 35,061 votes, 30.4% of the vote. That is still only 4% of the vote. So Phil Murphy with a big lead right now, but we're still waiting for 96% of the vote. Let's go back to Virginia, obviously, where this is a much more competitive race where anything could happen. 51% of the vote is in. Where have the new votes come from?
Well, we're starting to see, again, all these rural counties starting to fill up. And again, it's a small number of votes. I just pick a random one here. Amherst County, you see 64% of the estimate in. Glenn Youngkin in rural Virginia, which is Republican stronghold always. Trump country, somebody would say now, doing what he needs to do. You walk through these counties. But as you start to move up, the question is the math here that the Republican is getting overwhelming enough to offset? Jake, we still have a long way to go. Fairfax County, we're going to come back to it repeatedly. It may sound redundant or repetitive at home, but it's so critically important. Where Terry McAuliffe getting 72% of the vote right now, there are several 100,000 votes still to be counted here, right? We're at 37% of the estimated vote. So if you come out statewide and you look and you see 193,000, 194,000 almost Republican vote lead, it would be easy to say, looking at all that red, that the Republican is on the march here. And the Republican is in good shape here where we are right now, but we have lived this. We've lived this in past Virginia governor's races, past Virginia Senate races, and the two past presidential races in the state of Virginia where the Republican gets a lead. And then when you come up here, Fairfax is the biggest. A lot of votes still to be counted here. Some of the smaller suburbs here, only 10% in Alexandria. This is not going to be a ton of votes. It's a smaller community, but that more votes for McAuliffe to be counted here. It says we're at close to 70% in Arlington, so more votes, but a modest amount to be counted here. But then you start moving over into Fairfax County. You mentioned earlier Prince William County, smaller population. The largest is here. The fastest growing is in Loudoun, which says they're up to 95%. Youngkin, the other night, predicted he would win Loudoun County. A 10-point gap for him there is better than past Republicans. Is it enough? That's what we'll find out as we count more votes. Just want to come down here again, only at 23% in Prince William County. And as you watch the Republican math grow, a couple of things you're watching if you're the Democrats. Number one, what's left in Fairfax. And if it stays at a percentage anywhere close to that, Terry McAuliffe can make up a lot of ground. So that's what you have to watch. With only 37% in Fairfax, this is always late into the night we're watching this giant basket of votes. If it stays anywhere close to that percentage split, then McAuliffe's going to make up a lot of votes when the rest of them come in. We don't know that. There's no guarantee of that. So that's what we wait for. That's one thing. And again, I mentioned this earlier, the Republican Youngkin, I just want to see if the percentages have changed at all, and they have not. 20% in Chesapeake, 46% in Virginia Beach. Just want to move over here to Suffolk, 30% here. This area of the state, it used to be reliably Republican. Democrats have done very well in recent cycles, including both Joe Biden and Ralph Northam winning these three counties. We have more votes to count, but you're looking at the map. Glenn Youngkin has to change the map. From presidential history in Virginia, recent governor's history in Virginia.
He has to flip counties. Right. And right now, it's not done, but right now, those southeastern counties.
Southeastern counties, and here, again, Chesterfield County, suburbs south of Richmond. He's doing it there as well. The question is the margin big enough in places where there's less population? You can see the building blocks for Youngkin rewriting the map, but the key building blocks are here, especially Fairfax County.
So speaking of Northern Virginia and Fairfax County, punch up Fairfax County because I'm going to bring in Ryan Nobles right now who's going to give us an update because he gets the votes before they come on the magic wall. And Ryan, what do you have for us?
Yeah, that's right, Jake. And we do have an update now. Some of these precincts are starting to trickle in. 9 of the 247 precincts have reported Terry McAuliffe now at 109,000 votes. Glenn Youngkin just over 42,000 votes. And to John's point, it's really the percentage here that we have to watch in terms of the McAuliffe campaign, because Fairfax County is where they have the most available votes that they can get in all of Virginia. And when that first batch of votes came in that were all early votes and vote by mail, we saw the McAuliffe campaign with around a 74% of the vote that had come in. This next round of votes that came in, that came from voters that voted today, we saw that number start to trickle down from 74% to just a little more than 71%. That's not a good sign for the McAuliffe campaign as they go on into the night. Now, one optimistic sign for the McAuliffe campaign is that we're not done counting all the early votes. There's somewhere in the range of 25,000 or so early votes that have yet to be fully counted. They had to rescan a group of those early votes. He performed well in that first round of early votes that were already counted, as we said, somewhere in that 74% range. So there is optimism that if you're with the McAuliffe campaign, that you could do well in that group of votes as well. And the other thing we have to keep in mind when we're talking about Fairfax County is that there's still going to be a lot of vote by mail ballots that have to be counted, not just tonight, but over the next couple of days. Of course, any ballot that is postmarked by tonight and is received by Friday can still be counted. So if this turns out to be a very, very close race, which it could, as the way it tracks on, those vote by mail ballots are going to be very, very important. But the Fairfax County vote now starting to trickle in, not just those early votes, but also the election day votes. And those numbers have to continue to come in big numbers for Terry McAuliffe if Democrats have any hope of winning tonight. Jake.
All right, Ryan Nobles, thanks so much. He's in Fairfax County. John, punch up Arlington County, if you would. Because one thing that I'm curious about, so Terry McAuliffe doing very well. He has almost 80% of the vote here. And it's almost 70% of the vote. Has the turnout, though, matched what it's been in previous years? In other words, this is, 62,000 people with 68% reporting. What is the turnout in Arlington County been in the past?
It's a key point to look at. Again, it's not a presidential race. If you go back, let me go first just to the last governor's race because it clicks up earlier. Again, Ralph Northam wins the county with 80% at 68,000 votes, right? So where are we right now? Terry McAuliffe at 49,000 votes, and they say 68% is. How high does that number go? That will be one of the things to watch. I told you earlier, we know turnout's going to be higher than 2017. We are seeing higher turnout in the smaller rural counties.
Right.
We're seeing that. The question is the Democratic turnout also higher? Number one, is the turnout in those counties higher? And then number two, then what are the margins? That's the key math Ryan Nobles was getting at. I know you were waiting for someone in the field to say the count might not be done tonight. We have a ways to go. we have a ways to go. Now, look, if you're looking at the map, it can be confusing. When I go county to county, when we get a small smattering of votes and we write them on the chalkboard, it can be confusing. We just want to show you the reporting in the field. If you're looking at this right now, with 56% in, Youngkin in the lead by more than 207,000 votes. We know this is a much more competitive race in the Commonwealth of Virginia than the Biden-Trump race was. That was 10 points. We know this is a more competitive race than the last governor's race, which that's an 8-point race, a 9-point race when you round up there 4 years ago. Everything on this map now tells us it is a much more competitive race than either the last race for governor or the last race for president. Everything tells us that it's much more competitive. We have way too many questions still to be answered before we can say anything beyond that. Especially, again, we've lived this too many times. This fills in, the Republican takes a big lead, and we wait. And we wait here, and Ryan just made a very key point. How many votes are left? Does Terry McAuliffe keep that big 66, 67, close to 70% margin in Fairfax County? If so, we're going to be at this a while. If not, we'll see.
I mean, one of the other things, when you compare 2021 to 2020 with Biden-Trump or 2017 with Northam at Gillespie, is Donald Trump was a presence.
Right.
He was in the White House in both of those races. That was a huge motivator, not just for Republicans and all over the country, but for Democrats.
Absolutely.
A lot of people worried, a lot of Democrats worried that the Democrats are not as motivated to vote this year. We'll see. We'll see. The numbers are still coming in. It's very competitive. It's anybody's race. The numbers are coming in from New Jersey. The numbers are coming in from Virginia. They're coming in from all over the country. We'll have much more for you after this quick break. It's election night in America. Stay with us. We have another key race alert for you now. And let's look at the board here in Virginia, the governor's race. Republican Glenn Youngkin has an almost 200,000 vote lead. There is 58% of the vote in. Now 59% of the vote in. We just got some more votes. Glenn Youngkin with 1,026,074 votes. That is 54.8% of the vote. He is 191,843 votes ahead of Democrat Terry McAuliffe, who has 834,231 votes. That is 44.5% of the vote. As of right now, with 59% of the vote in, Glenn Youngkin has a 10 percentage point lead over Democrat Terry McAuliffe. In New Jersey, with 6% of the vote in, Democratic incumbent Governor Phil Murphy has 110,498 votes. That is 66.3% of the vote. He is about 55,829 votes ahead of Republican Jack Ciattarelli, who has 54,669 votes, 32.8% of the vote. But again, that is only 6% of the vote reported. Let us now go to Sarah Murray, who is in Richmond, Virginia, at election headquarters, who can give us an update on the status of the votes coming in. Sarah.
That's right. We talked to Chris Piper. He's the commissioner of the Virginia Department of Elections. He wouldn't put a number on where the turnout stands, but he did say there is heavy turnout. One of the hiccups he said they were dealing with today, election officials across the state, were ballot shortages. He said about half a dozen counties, places like Appomattox, Chesterfield counties, experienced ballot shortages. They had to get additional ballots brought in in order to ensure that everyone there was able to vote. He did say overall this is a day that has gone very smoothly. He reiterated to voters, this should make you all trust the process. These are secure systems. Additional ballots were brought in. People were able to vote. People should feel confident that they were able to cast their ballot, that they were able to vote. A very important message, I think, on Election Day, Jake.
All right, Sarah Murray, thank you so much. New York City polls close in 18 minutes, and we will bring you the results live. For that, we're going to squeeze in another quick break. We'll be right back when Election Night in America continues. Stay with us. We can now make a projection in one of the two special congressional races in Ohio today. CNN projects that Democrat Shontel Brown has been elected to Congress in Ohio's 11th district, holding on to the seat for Democrats. She defeats Republican Laverne Gore in the district, which stretches from Cleveland to Akron. That leaves Democrats with a narrow majority in the U.S. House of Representatives, holding 221 seats to 212 for Republicans. 2 seats are still up for grabs. There's another one in Ohio and another one in Florida, where a special primary is being held. We're awaiting results of those two. We now have a key race alert for you. Now we're looking at the governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey. Let's look at the numbers. With 61% of the estimated vote in from Virginia, Republican Glenn Youngkin remains in the lead. He has 1,061,140 votes. That's 54.6% of the vote. He is 192,385 votes ahead of Democrat Terry McAuliffe, who has 868,755 votes. That is 44.7% of the vote. Glenn Youngkin right now, with many votes remaining to be counted, with roughly a 10 percentage vote lead, almost 200,000 votes ahead as of this hour. Let's go to New Jersey now. With 6% of the vote in, incumbent Democratic Governor Phil Murphy has 112,300 votes. That's 64.4% of the vote. He is 51,768 votes ahead of Republican Jack Ciattarelli, who has 65,270 votes. That's 35.4% of the vote. And we just got another percentage point with Phil Murphy remaining in the lead. And tell us where the votes are coming in from in the Garden State, John.
A lot of votes still to be counted, but Democrats who right now have a serious case of jitters when it comes to Virginia are feeling more confident when it comes to blue New Jersey. You mentioned Governor Murphy seeking to be reelected, 63% of the vote to 36% of the vote. We have a lot of votes still to come, but if you look at Newark, Essex County, Newark, largest urban area right there, the 3rd largest county in the state, running it up as a Democrat has to do in the urban area, but again, only 7% of the vote, but again, filling in as the governor would like. You move up here, you're starting to move into the New York suburbs and around as you come up. Again, running it up, you have someone at your table who has a long life history in Bergen County. You can ask her about this when you get over there. Still no votes from there. But essentially, you're looking at New York City here and the suburbs right up here. This is where this race is normally won or lost, big population centers. But if you come down here, Mercer County is Trenton, the suburbs around it. Again, only 7%, but the early vote coming in the way Governor Murphy would like it to as you look up. Again, Camden, you're familiar from Philadelphia. Camden, the suburbs here, 74% for the governor. Just to go back in time, we're looking at 25% there. You got 67% here 4 years ago. So if you were looking to see if there would be a night of Democratic panic, meaning losing 2 governorships, it appears. Only at 7%. Let's be careful. Go ahead.
What's the red county there?
Right in here. You come over here, Ocean County. I believe that was also red. Yes, this is a reliably Republican county out here. See, Kim Giordano 4 years ago at 62% of the vote. It's about a little shy of that, Jack Ciattarelli, as it fills in. So the map is filling in the population centers for Democrats early on, still at 7%, and we'll watch it. But this one is filling in a way that early on, anyway, Democrats can be much more confident than what they're seeing here. Again, a long way to go still here, but when you see Glenn Youngkin, 261% of the vote counted. Now, Ryan Nobles mentioned this, Jay, quickly earlier. As more votes come in Fairfax, what happens to Terry McAuliffe's percentage? He was above 70 early on, now down to 67%. Still a lot more votes to come in here. But if you're looking at the trend lines in this map, if you're in the Youngkin campaign, you're a lot happier than if you're in McAuliffe headquarters right now when you pull that out.
Yeah, I mean, that's an 80,000 vote lead from McAuliffe. If you double it, that's only 80,000, and Glenn Youngkin is right now 201,000 votes ahead of Terry McAuliffe. That's not going to be enough in that county alone. We're heading into another critical hour of election results coming up. Polling places are about to close in New York City, where voters are choosing a new mayor. Much more of our coverage right after this. Stay with us.